Hello, everybody. This is Steel Rose's podcast. This podcast was created for women by women to elevate women's voices. I'm super excited to introduce you to our guest today, not just because she's fantastic, but because we've tried to record together at least 3 or 4 times and it did not happen. So today's the day. And I'm super excited about it. So I want to have all of you give a warm welcome to Mina Brower. She is a Mexican-American citizen who aims to inspire other immigrants to chase their dreams. She's a wife, a mom, and a lawyer, and is proud to live a lifelong dream of also adding author to her many list of titles. And if you were to ask Mina how she balances it all, she would give you a diplomatic legalese answer of, that depends, which I think many of us would feel quite deeply. Every time I read that line, I'm like, yeah, it depends on the day you ask me, the time of day. So Mina, welcome to the show. I'm super excited that we're here in this recording.
Yes, I know. I was like, it's meant to be. We're doing it today. Thank you for having me on.
I pulled out all the stops. I was like, it's happening. Mina, I would love it if you introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them a little bit about your story, because you have quite a wide range here. I mean, you're a lawyer beyond the wife and mom, which we already know is like tough stuff. You're also a lawyer, and now you're also an author. So I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. But yeah, so my story, my lore, that's like the new Instagram going around. They're talking about everyone's lore. So my story began pretty much when we immigrated here. I immigrated here to the United States with my parents. And we immigrated, and my parents were so focused on the American dream and what that typically looks like for immigrants. So typically you'll see, if a family immigrates together, the parents always want their children to be doctors or lawyers, that very like high education, postgraduate sort of lifestyle. And I understand it from a perspective of trying to, gain some stability and trying to make sure that the child is prosperous in the future. So education is very heavy. It's a very heavy topic for a lot of immigrant families. And that was my case. So we immigrated here, and my parents were very, very tough when it came to, school and education and all of that. And we were all learning English together at the same time. And I think because for kids, if there's any immigrants listening out there who learned English as a second language, when you're a child, when you learn English, you pick it up fairly quickly. And for adults, it's a little bit difficult just because the kids' brains are like sponges, right? So my parents would say things like, can you help me translate this? Or can you help me translate this? Or let's go to the grocery store and I need you to like help me order this. So that was my experience, which is not unique. It's very common. But I think because of the advocacy that I did in a very young age, and the reading that I had to do, like high-end like reading like leases and things like that, I was sort of put on a sort of automatic path of advocacy. So my parents were like, well, you can be a doctor or a lawyer, so let's pick. And I was like, okay, what about writer? Because I love writing, because you guys have me writing, you have me reading all of these things and I'm doing all of these things, and they're like, no, definitely not writer. And I said, okay, well, let me do lawyer, right? And I think if you don't have the immigrant experience like that, to ask a child to make a decision like that very early on sounds very almost too much, right? Like over the top. But again, I understand it from a wanting to fulfill the American dream perspective. So anyways, we set on a path of like this higher education sort of goal. And in the middle of all of that, I developed a love of writing fiction. And it was something where it became my passion, my hobby. And we would have family parties. I mean, we're Hispanic, so big family parties, like music and everything. I would be upstairs in my room in the family desktop, which was conveniently in my room, typing and writing and short stories and everything. And eventually, my claim to fame, according to me, is that I won my school's young author competition, which is like a big deal because it's like my book went to like regionals or something like that, or to state. And I thought I made it. I came home with a little trophy and I told my parents, I'm like, look, like there's a future in this. And they're like, no. You're in 8th grade. Like, relax. So then, the years passed by. And it wasn't until I became a mom and was dealing with, I did eventually go to law school, thank goodness for my parents. and it's something that I do enjoy. But it wasn't until my postpartum journey after becoming a mom that I really gave writing a chance. Because at the time, shortly after I gave birth, I was in therapy for postpartum emotions and feelings and all of that. And my therapist said, "Have you ever considered writing out your feelings and your emotions? Because you have a lot of warring feelings of sadness, happiness, all of that." And I said, "Well, I love writing. I never thought of, looking at it like this." So a lot of things came together, and I was able to sort of start writing and revisit that passion of mine. And then just for everyone's purposes that are listening, and even to you, Jenny, I know that you're so passionate about women balancing everything that is going on in their lives. I think it's so important that we talk about it. For me specifically, when I started writing this book, I was struggling with a lot of really sad emotions because I had suffered from infertility for such a long time. So for me, it was like, I'm trying to be a lawyer. I'm trying to be a new mom. I'm balancing all of these feelings and emotions I should be really happy that I'm a new mom, but I'm like extremely sad because I've suffered so much loss. So yeah, it's a lot of things came together, and then the book started materializing, and then, one thing led to another, and then I eventually published a year after. But yeah, that's how it happened.
So you touched on a lot of things that I want to talk about.
A lot.
So, well, first and foremost, so my husband's Ecuadorian, so I'm very well versed with the big family parties. I have to tell you, as you were talking about that, I was picturing the very first year that we moved into our house. We decided it would be a great idea to host Thanksgiving 3 weeks after we moved in. And by we, I don't mean me. But the idea was he was so excited. He was so excited. Yeah. And we didn't have any furniture. I had to order folding tables from Amazon. Like, there was nothing here.
But that's the typical Hispanic party: folding tables and chairs. Like, you're done.
The food was good. It was solid. It was a solid. So I love that part of your story because it does provide a little bit of a glimpse of what it is when you do immigrate here and what you're looking for. You're looking and what your parents are looking for, because I've heard similar from my in-laws. That they really they wanted their kids to get an education. They wanted them to be successful, to have something better than what they had. And thankfully, for the most part, they all did. But that's really what it is. Like, you're coming here because you want something a little bit better. And here's the place where this can really happen. Like, you can make it happen. So I really resonated with that part of your story because of my husband, and just knowing what he went through. And he immigrated here when he was a little kid. So, but he had the same experience as you were. Like, he always had to help his parents out. He still does it. His parents didn't really ever learn English. So it was just, if anything, I actually learned Spanish when we were dating, because I was like, I'm going to need to talk to my mother-in-law at some point. So that makes, I think that I really like that part of your story. The part that I also want to touch on, because this is where, this is the pivotal moment, you becoming a writer, because I mean, being a lawyer in itself is like that. That's huge. And any woman after having a child, like I used to say when I was pregnant with my son, sounds so stupid now, but when I was pregnant with my son, I used to tell people that I worked with, oh yeah, I can't wait to have him, because then regular Jenny will be back, not pregnant Jenny. And I kept saying regular Jenny is going to be here. Like, regular Jenny will be able to do, the workload that I used to do. And I always referred to regular Jenny. And then my son was born, and I had the shock of, oh, that Jenny isn't here anymore.
Priority shift.
Yeah. There wasn't a regular Jenny anymore. It was mom Jenny. And nobody really talks about that part. That's like, there is a very huge thing that happens there. Now, after you have a baby, I don't know if you've heard this before, but after you have a baby, there's an actual physical change that happens in women's brains that is chemical, and it'll show, like, our brains will shift and change because now we've had a child. And so it's basically like it's a old thing that's just like kind of part of our biology. And that mental shift happens so that we can care for our children. That's also the reason why moms and dads will have a lot of conflict after a child is born, because that has not happened to the man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not his fault.
Right.
He's going to continue. It's
Yeah.
not biological for him. So he's going to continue on living his life.
Mm-hmm.
And you're changed deeply. And then you're like, well, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you changed deeply? Like,
Yeah.
it's just, but there's an actual physical reason. I like to highlight that because a lot of people have a lot of marriage problems, and self included. I'm not exempt from that.
Yeah, right.
I think I was just telling someone today, the worst times in our marriage was the first few years when we were having kids, because it was so straining on and draining on us. I was incredibly sleep deprived. Yeah. I had postpartum depression after my pregnancies. I still tried to work. It really does snowball. So I want you to talk a little bit more about when you started writing postpartum, did you go right into creative mode, or did you start journaling and going from there?
Yeah. So, I also absolutely experienced like the marital sort of in crisis situation. We can talk about that as well. But, so, right before I got pregnant, I was sort of journaling a little bit, because I never gave up on my dream of like writing, but I never took it seriously. So I was creating this like universe world series, and it never really went anywhere. But the shift for me happened during that moment in time where my therapist said, okay, well, we need to figure out how to get these emotions out. So I talked with my husband and I said, this is something that I need to do, because I'm already, I was put into therapy while I was pregnant, because I was a very high risk of being postpartum depression. Mm. My gyno obstetrician team were like amazing. They were like, all right, you're high risk because like your job is very like stressful. Like, I mean, I was working when I was in labor. I was sending work emails, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So my doctors were like, okay, we're going to put you in therapy, like, and you're going to continue in therapy. So, and I just graduated from therapy, like, probably 3 months ago. But anyways, so I said to my husband, I need to do this. I need to, be able to, do this exercise with my therapist. And my husband said, I don't want to villainize all men, but it's not really typical, because he said to me, okay.
It's not typical.
Okay. So it ended up working out that from 9 p.m. to 12, every single day, I had like me time, which is not normal.
Not normal.
Not normal, because I started writing my book when I was 5 months postpartum. So it was incredible to see my husband step up, in the parent department and in the partner department, and to say, okay, I got the house. I'll be downstairs washing dishes. I'll be downstairs sanitizing the bottles, and we'll make it work. It worked out for me because I was in breastfeeding at that time, because my milk just like stopped.
Yeah.
So we were feeding formula, so that helped a lot. And when you feed formula, typically babies fall asleep quicker and longer because they're
that's what I did.
Right. So I don't want to make it seem like it's like this fairy tale. Like there was a lot of things involved that made it possible so I could write. But my husband, he would bring me up like mocktails, like, because I don't really drink. So he would buy like the fake alcohol thing. He would bring me up like margarita, jalapeno mocktails, and he's like, here. He was just so accommodating, and I think he saw how much I was struggling mentally, that he was like, if you're not okay, you can't be a good mom, and I know that you're going to feel like shit if you're not a good mom. Mm-hmm. So let's get you to a place where you are able to function, and so that's sort of what made it possible for me to get to that moment.
I want to touch on the support of your husband there, because I always do want to say, like, I like to say, I'm like, I don't want to villainize men either. Like, obviously I'm married. Like, right. They have their place. I mean, come on, like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
What I didn't do, and I'm in the middle of writing something that's supposed to be released later this year as part of a book. Mm-hmm. And in part of it, I'm telling my story a little bit about how I never asked for help.
Yes.
I very deeply, I was raised in a house where it was like, if you're a martyr, that's the best thing for you.
Yeah.
You know, turn the other cheek, sacrifice, self-sacrifice, just do it. And I remember like this messaging coming along consistently. And in my head as a growing up, I remember being like, no, like that's crazy. I'm not doing all this. And I remember seeing like my mom was not happy at the end. Like she was resentment, you know, and bitter. And I remember being like, I'm not going to be like that. But the learned behavior was already there.
Right.
And so I had my son in 2016, and then I had twins in 2017. And out of sheer determination to prove people wrong, I was like, I will carry all of this. I will still travel for work. I will still push my career forward, and I can be a great mom. Yeah. And that thought is insane because it truly takes a village. Oh, yeah. And had I actually accepted help, I refused help. Like my parents would come over, my aunt would come over. My husband had 2 older kids. Like he's been down the road before. He already knew what to do. But I was determined to be like, no, these are my children. I'm caring for them. Like that's it.
That's how I was when I was pregnant. I refused.
Yeah, even when the help was there, I was like, no, it's fine. They're like, Jenny, just go lay down, like go rest. And I refused it. And I got to a certain point where it blew up in my face basically because I just kept saying no, and I should have asked for help. And it just, I couldn't at the time. I still have a little trouble with it, but not as much as I used to. Like
it doesn't go away ever because that's our immediate.
That's our immediate. Well, so my point with that whole long like rant, because I think I've been thinking about it, I'm like, my God, Jenny, I hope, hopefully I can teach my daughters better. But my whole point there is there's a lot of instances where we're not clear with our husbands about what we need. Right. They're not mind readers.
Right.
Like communication is such a huge deal. So like my husband and I work in communications in general, and he just likes to talk. So like, but he, when he came into this marriage, and I learned so much from him because he did come in, and anytime there was something that would happen that like seemed like there was a tone of resentment or seemed like that it wasn't quite done yet, he was very much we're not going to sleep until
we talk it out,
until we're cool. And I was always like, oh, please. Can we please, but he was like, no, like we're addressing this. Like, we're not going to fail here. Like, we're going to make this happen. And, I think that that's part of the issue with women across the board is if you don't ask for help and you're not very clear to your husband, like, I'm falling apart. It's okay to say it. I'm falling apart.
Yeah.
I'm not myself. I'm out of my head.
Especially like after work, like something so simple, like them coming home from work and you've been with the kids for hours, right?
Oh, God.
Because I work from home. So like,
I know.
I have help, right? So like I'm not by myself with her. Like I have help here inside of my house, but then my husband eventually comes home, and like I'm home, so like I'm still sort of interacting with my child, and then my husband comes home, and I'm like, okay, well, like I'm touched out.
Yes.
I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm gonna go into our bedroom and I'm gonna lay down and I'm gonna be on Instagram for the next hour. Do not talk to me.
Yeah.
Bother me, and I'm not available, and you figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Figure it out.
I say that the way that I say it to my kid. I'm like, mommy just needs to be a potato for a minute.
Yes.
So please just, I can't talk to you. I can't. And I was texting one of my mom friends, and I was like, it's like a wild overload because it'll be like TV here. And then all 3 of my kids are so close in age. And it happened earlier when I was getting them ready for bed. I was sitting in the girls' room, and my son is sitting next to me. My daughter's in the chair. My other daughter's over here. And Vincent starts to talk to me. And then he was like 75% of the way done with his thought. But then the other one started talking, and she was about 50% done. And then the third one. And so they were literally all talking at the same time. And I was like, okay, wait. And I was like trying to.
Yeah. We're the nurturer, and it's like we're supposed to quote, people can't see me, but I'm quoting, we're supposed to take it all in. That's that's the image of women and of moms.
Yeah, and
we can't do it all the time.
The mental drain is very real. I'm actually very impressed that you do have that buffer time at the end of your day, by the way, because that's actually been something I always struggle with. So like you're seeing me where I record right now, like where I record right now, this is like an office space. It used to be a dining room area, but we converted it to an office space for me. And right there in that black hole behind me, that's the living room.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm working here, they're usually all right there. And then it doesn't even really matter if I move someplace, because we have an office upstairs too. So sometimes I'll go up there if I really need to be by myself. Mm-hmm. They will
The noise follows you.
Well, they
People
will
follow
come
you.
upstairs. Wait, can I tell you? They'll come upstairs, even if the door is locked. They will start playing right outside the door. Like
Oh yeah.
that's everywhere I go, and I have to laugh about it a little bit because it's always like little ducklings. Like they will follow me and they will not leave me.
Right. No, it's like to go to the bathroom. It's like an open door policy. It's like, oh my
Oh,
God, can I please
I
like
can't even get a minute in there because it's always
yeah,
as soon as I go in there, I
you're
hear like
paddling
a
at the
knock.
door now.
Mommy, are you?
Yeah.
So the key takeaway here is the struggle is very real for all of us.
Yes.
And when you work from home, Mina, I actually really love that you step away. I've been really wanting to do something like that.
Oh,
To
do
say
it.
like I need to
Do
take
it.
15 minutes because even like today I worked until 5, from 5 to 6 I like whipped together dinner.
Mm-hmm.
I had another call at 6.
And then you have to put your kids to bed because
And
like
then I had to get them showered and do all
yeah,
that. So it was like a
yeah,
duh, 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 duh.
yeah. Yeah, honestly, I think it's and I think it's beneficial for our partners as well. I come from eventually my parents divorced, so I come from that very um background of seeing adults not communicate effectively,
Mhm.
and seeing how a marriage can deteriorate. So for me, it's even more beneficial for me to take after my daughter is in bed and she's sleeping, for me to just if I'm not even if I'm not writing, to just take an hour by myself
Mhm.
and then to just afterwards interact with my husband, because then it's not
Yeah.
fair to him either.
No.
You know what I mean? Or even if people sometimes don't have an hour, right? 15 minutes, like you said, or 30 minutes
Honestly,
to allow yourself to nurture yourself, but then also be ready to have a meaningful time with your partner.
yeah.
Yeah. So
If
yeah,
you're not filling your own cup,
right.
exactly what you said in the beginning when you talked about how your husband supported you during your postpartum depression period. If you can't correct what's going on in yourself, if you can't fill your own cup, you're no good to your children. You just
Yeah.
aren't. And like I had my big shift away from being in the burnout model consistently and really not paying attention to my own cup literally happened like 3 years ago when we moved into this house.
Yeah.
And I had like a catalyst moment of I was working these wild hours
Mm-hmm.
and my kids grew up outside with my husband and I had to watch from the window because I was working these crazy hours. Like I didn't teach them to swim or dive off the diving board or do any of those cool things. That was all my husband. And I watched it all from upstairs the whole
Yep.
time, like eating away at me, like, wow, like
Life is
I
passing you
wanted
by.
so badly to have children. And now instead of being with my kids, I'm like up here
Well,
working. I'm like, this doesn't match up.
the working model is not designed for mothers,
No.
and you can have as much um, parental leave, whatever you want to call it. You can have an incredible HR department or whatever, but the corporate world and professions aren't designed for moms. And it's
Mm.
very sad, because, we want to continue working.
Yeah.
We want to continue, like, it costs me a lot, like emotionally and physically, and all of these things become a lawyer. I mean, or any profession, right? Um, and then to see it all sort of shift drastically and have like an identity crisis almost of like, what am I doing? Is this even worth my time? Because like you
Yeah.
said, my child is outside playing, and I'm in here literally also me watching it from the window.
Yeah.
So it's a very coming to God moment of what do I do?
Yeah. Well, so I will say this. In that moment, that's actually when the podcast was born.
Oh,
That was when the podcast was born. So it's very interesting to me because every single woman that comes onto this podcast and shares their story, there was a catalyst moment
yeah.
of cancer in some instances, a death in their family, an assault. Like there was something that happened that the woman has decided, I am not living my life like this anymore.
Yeah.
So I had that catalyst moment because I came up from this project that was like 3 weeks long. I hadn't seen my kids, even though I live in this house.
Right.
And they were all bigger and I was totally crushed. So I had this, you know what? You've talked about podcasting. That seems like something that's like really big. Like, why don't you just do it? Just go for it. And in pulling that trigger, it aligned me with a whole bunch of people that have pushed my life into a whole different pathway that I would have never been able to do. And I now have more balance now than I ever had before in my life.
Right.
And I have autonomy in my work in my daytime job to be able to step away,
Right.
which is huge. Like my kids came home from school at 3:55 and I made everybody their snacks and had made sure they had healthy
You were
food.
present.
And I was able to actually do that without feeling like I had this pit of like, oh my God, work. Oh my God, I got to get to my emails. It's not like that. And it's only because I've been able to do this. Now, and I'll also say this before we move on, because I want to talk about your book release. Another thing that I started doing is I get up super early.
Yeah. I need to start doing that.
I get up super early. So I try for 5, but that doesn't really happen because I like to sleep. So usually at like 5:45, 6 o'clock is when I start to really get up. And then I have from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. or 6:45 to just write. I do journaling. I started journaling this year. So every morning I journal, and then I'll do meditation, affirmation, visualization. Sometimes I do yoga. Like it depends on like how much time I have, but that moment in the morning feeds me for the entire day.
Yes. Because you center yourself. It's you're feeding your soul. You're feeding your spirituality. You're not praying, but it's a form of spirituality.
It's a form of,
to be at peace with your soul. So yeah,
it's huge. And I know like not everyone's morning people. Some people would rather do that at night. I'm not a night person because as you said, like I want to spend the evening with my husband. Like he worked all day, I worked all day. Like let's hang out.
When is a Netflix episode going to get watched, right?
Yeah, like we got to do something here. And it's funny because that's what we do. We pick a series and we're like, oh, what are we going to watch?
Yeah.
So you went through postpartum. Your husband was he supported you, you were able to make it through. And in that, you found your voice again in writing.
Yes.
And how did the writing to the book come to be? Like, how did you get there?
So, I started, okay, how do I explain this? Basically one of the characters, and a lot of writers will say that this happened to them as well. One of my characters came to me in a dream, and he basically visited me, and the scene where he visited me, I put it in my book, and it's like almost verbatim. And I mean, I felt like he was like maybe like an angel or just something from my subconscious saying like, hey,
I'm here.
Like,
oh, that's cool.
There's a story worth telling here of a woman finding her voice after suffering. And I sort of let that guide me into this fantastical world where people, the male main character is dealing with grief of having lost his future wife and people around him dying, and he's carrying this survivor's guilt. And the woman had been carrying his child. So it was a way for me to connect and create a character that was like dealing with grief at the same time that I was dealing with grief with my pregnancy losses. So he is the god of moonlight and stardust. So he is the title is the book of the first book. The title of the first book is named after him. So he really taught me a lot about processing my own, like, again, emotions about grief and all that. And then I created this badass woman who is so strong and fierce that the dream visitor that came to me was like, hey, there's a story here about like a woman finding her voice. And I created her, and she, it's a fantasy book. So there's magic and there's supernatural, because that's so cool to me. And she has supernatural powers, and she is a daughter of a villainous god in a dystopian post-apocalyptic world. And in this post-apocalyptic world, magic is forbidden. And there is a very triggering, chaotic event that sort of makes her question whether she should embrace the legacy of magic within her and use it, or try to be as normal and as invisible as possible and like try to fit into this society. And then the god of moonlight and stardust helps her sort of claim and understand her identity. So that's sort of, I got asked if it's autobiographical. Certainly not, but there are elements.
There's some elements there that I can see.
There's elements of survival, of a woman making it despite all odds, despite very extreme hardships like domestic violence and PTSD and anxiety, and she's a fighter. And I think women, and she's also a PhD student. So she's like an older female book character. She's not 18. So she has this life experience that she's gone through. And I feel like I wrote her in mind with all of the incredible women that are, you know, in their mid 30s up, you know, who have all this life experience and these loves and these losses and are just dying to find a voice after, you know, these potential very sad events. So, and then having a supportive partner as well.
You know, I like that you chose that age range quite a bit because you're right. Like most of the books are like, oh, she was like 22 and like whatever. You know, I recently said to somebody, well, first of all, it's a little bit funny because, you know, like when you are 18 or whatever that age, you think about your 40s and you're like, oh God, that's like really old. Well, it's also, it's like really old. And now I'm there and I'm like, wait, hold up. It's not that bad.
I'm almost there too. And I'm like, no, it's young. It's young.
It's not bad. Well, so
40s is a new 30.
Honestly, well, I was talking to my husband about this the other day because when did I have my kids? I think I was like 31 and 32 when I had them. I only really had just started scraping the surface of who Jenny is in my 30s.
Yeah.
And then my whole 30s felt like I was digging myself out of toxic behaviors, bad habits. Like, I mean, like just explained in detail, like how I never asked for help. Like, please, you know, like give me a break here. I didn't have my catalyst moment that pushed me to where I am now until I was like 38. You know, like I was older and I feel like, you know, there's this whole like ageist culture that's like, oh, you're getting older. Yeah. Oh God. It's like, oh, women getting older is like, you know, you're a hag, you're a, what is that? Not a crow.
A crone.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Did you know, like, there was spinster. This is something I talked about recently, actually. Yep. Okay, hold on a second.
On the shelf.
First of all, I remember being told that. So, like, when I was in like my early 20s and I was single, and everyone's like, "Oh, you need to get married. You need to do this. You don't want to be a spinster." And I was like, "Do I not want to?" Okay. Well, listen to this though. Historically, spinster. The term spinster was originally coined to describe a female who was unmarried, but she had her own business. Like she was a spinster, meaning like she spun like, I think wool or thread or whatever it was. So she was called a spinster because that was her job. That was something that she did. And somehow that got like construed into like, oh, you're a spinster. Like that's bad. This is the first like woman entrepreneur. What are we talking about? This is okay, I'd like to be a spinster right now. Like that'd be awesome if I could like, you know, everything that has to do with women getting older seems to have this like terrible connotation.
You have to have your stuff figured out. And she doesn't. And it's interesting because so my character, she has like everything like academically going for her. She's doing her PhD and everything and the classics. But in terms of her personal life, she does not have it figured out.
Yeah.
And that's so refreshing to me.
I mean, thank goodness. It's real. That's real. Like who has it figured out? Again, I just started and I turned 41 this year. And now I'm like, I said to my cousin, I'm like, I feel like my 40s are going to be really like amazing because now I'm like,
you arrived.
Yes. I'm like, I'm here. Thank you. I'm like, you know, I said that I'm like, I feel like I'm here. Like I'm awake and I'm like owning this and I'm present and I'm not like just wishing the time away. Like I actively make it a point. What's today? Tuesday? Yeah. Yesterday, everybody had off, you know, and my kids had off and I had actually planned on it being like a podcasting work day.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, like I was all excited to do it. And it's just kind of snowballed it because I was alone with my kids. And I sat down to do some work and to work on this book chapter that I'm writing for this book for later this year. And I got a couple sentences in and they were just kind of bickering, you know, like kids, like they're just bickering with each other. And I kind of just stopped and I was like, what are you doing? They're home. Yeah. Just hang out with them. Like, just whatever. Like, you're not going to get your stuff done. Just be cool with it and move on with your life. Like
you're only so little for such a little time.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I love that your character is in a point in her life where she's still trying to figure things out. She's still trying to find her own voice. Yeah. She's trying to heal from past trauma, which I mean, that's in itself also I want to talk about because, you know, in our age range, you're younger than me, but still like in this grouping, our parents' generation, mental health was not like a thing. So like,
it wasn't, especially for Hispanics.
Definitely not for Hispanics. No,
And,
not even.
your husband, or maybe you still see it in like his family. It's just, it's not real.
No.
And I remember a family member asking for help. And I was a child, but I was like, I was there for that conversation, and an adult in my life said, I need help. Like, I need a psychologist. And another adult in my life looked at this person and said, are you crazy? Do you want to go to like an insane asylum?
Exactly.
I mean, it was such an extreme response to someone saying like, hey, I need help. But yeah, mental health is just not.
It wasn't a thing. And, so it makes sense to me that this generation, our generation, I guess I'm an older millennial is what I've been told I am. The older millennial generation, like we're on the cusp of like, oh, we could really make big shifts for society.
Yes.
Like we get the knowledge of our parents and what they did that didn't really work. And now we can really come here and like
we
show.
Have the tools.
And we have the tools.
Therapy is much more accessible now.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like I did telehealth.
Yeah.
You know, I was doing telehealth. I didn't even have to leave my house.
That's
and
amazing.
I know some people even do like texting therapists. Like it's like
I would do that 100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's so accessible any which way that you want it.
And I also think like the branding up, like, I mean, people aren't as like scared to say like, oh, I'm in therapy. No, it's not like you don't have the same thing.
It's applauded. It's seen as a very positive thing.
Yeah. I think that
30 years ago, that was not the case.
And honestly, like it does say a lot about the state of like people that are older than us now. Cause I remember I have two brothers. I'm in between them. I have an older and a younger. And I had tried to explain to my mom the one time something that she did that I was like, Mom, look, I'm an adult now, so it doesn't bother me as much, but I want you to know that when you do this action, you're telling me I'm not as important as my brothers.
Right.
And she was like,
well, I'm a terrible mother.
No, Mina, all she did was she rolled her eyes, did this deep sigh of, oh, give me a break. I was like, all right. I was like, forget it. Never mind.
Or you get the classic, oh, I'm a terrible mom.
Oh, I'm so terrible.
I gave you guys so much trauma. And it's like,
no. That's not what I was trying to tell you.
No, we're not doing this so that you can turn it around and then make me feel bad for like.
No, I let it go. What my husband always says to me, he's like, look, we've both been through trauma from our parents. Yeah. Let's just do better for our kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, I think this is wonderful stuff. So you have a new book being released, correct?
Yes. Okay. So it's the second. So it's a series. It's the Daughters of Chaos series, and I named it like that because there are the first book deals with the first daughter, and then the second book we meet the other two daughters of this villainous god, and it's just like their stories of how they deal with having this legacy of magic, of this very like terrible.
This is very cool.
Domestic abuser, basically, and how they find their voice and their power, because it's very much the story of, I don't want to be like my parents.
Yeah.
And what happens if you have their magical powers? So it's that question of like, okay, well, you know what? It's like, even for you and for me, how we were just talking about, like, we're learning these lessons from our, very like baby boomer parents or like other older parents. And I don't want to be like that. But what happens if you have magical powers? So that's the question. And how do you navigate that? So,
you know what the through line is there? I was thinking about while you were talking, because in the story, it's like, well, what if you have their, magical powers? Like, so you are kind of like them.
Yes.
But that applies though to what we were talking about. Like, you're going to have parts of your parents. There's, like I said, there's learned behavior that you can't avoid.
Yeah.
How can you make it work for you? Which is, I'm having a sense that that's what these women do.
And how can you use it for good and not evil? Because because it's a fantasy, so he's like a villainous god.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is fantastic. I'm very excited. I'm very excited. And I also love these types of books because I have to be honest with you, I'm so serious all the time.
Yes. Same.
I need that, like,
there's just a mental escape.
Yes. Yeah. Just a mental escape that's just a release, and it's like, this is fun. And like, I've been watching a bunch of like new like Netflix series because of it. I'm like, I just need something that's not educational. I don't need to be teaching myself all the time. I'm excited about it. So listeners, what I'm going to do is, because Her book is not being released until June 30th, but the airing of your episode is actually going to be in April. And the listeners are listening right now in April, so it'll be fine. But what we'll do is we're going to link your website and your socials in the description of the episode. So listeners, you can follow Mina.
And they can pre-order the book. They'll be able to
There
pre-order
you
the
go. Perfect. Okay.
They'll be able to pre-order it and the ebook at least. And then I feel that by April, potentially maybe they'll be able to pre-order the paperback. So
okay.
Well, I'll give you all the information.
Okay, cool. So then Mina and I will connect before the episode airs. We'll get all the appropriate links in there, and then even when it airs, let's do a little splash. We want to make sure the listeners know because that's super exciting.
Yeah.
Mina, thank you so much for coming on, and I'm so glad we actually got to record today.
Yes. Oh, thank you. And I really appreciate that you created this space for women to talk about these issues because I've listened to your other episodes and it's refreshing to find honesty because I feel like social media portrays this image that everyone has their shit together and we don't. And I think we need space like raw, real spaces like this where women can say like, hey, so life sucks.
Yeah,
and
I'm a mess.
And I'm trying to do the best.
Yeah.
And this is what's working, what's not working. And yeah. So I really appreciate the value that you bring to a space that is, that needs this conversation.
That you like made my whole day because, I'm in season 3 now. So I'm like 3 seasons, like it's been a lot. It's been a journey.
And people resonate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been honestly, a really beautiful journey. And the part that, like you said, people are resonating with the episodes. And I mean, I was telling somebody recently, they were asking me like, well, what do you do on social media? Like, what do you do this? Like, and it was basically like, what are you doing? That's like bro marketing, like that kind of thing. Yeah. And I don't do bro marketing. Like I really just will release stuff when I can. But the listenership, it went international on its own. Mm-hmm. And the reach extended quite significantly on its own. And the listenership, it was like up by 400% in season 3 on its own, like truly just on its own. People are finding their way. And much like what we said earlier with you read a book when it's appropriate for the time for you to read it. I feel like that with this podcast, people are finding it when they need to hear this message. Yes. And each episode has its own message and it's not the same content over and over again. And it's new things and new voices. And even if it's the same subject, it's still a new voice and a different perspective. Yeah. And you really took the premise and summarized it quite nicely because this is meant to be a non-judgmental space where we can just have an organic conversation and the listeners can know that they're not alone. Yeah.
I mean, like, if someone listening, they might not be a lawyer. They might not have had postpartum, depression and been in therapy, but they can maybe take away, of asking for help, learning how to potentially and eventually balance it all. We're not meant to do it all on our own. And I think you saying that it takes a village, is very applicable to not only raising kids, but also for our own selves. Mm-hmm. Because just because we grow up and we become adults doesn't mean that we still don't need that village.
Oh, no.
So, yeah.
Very, very nicely said. Well, Mina, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
And listeners, thank you for hanging out with us. And we will see you on the next one. Take care.
Bye.